A poor single mum lets a lost man stay the night, thinking it's just one small act of kindness. But the moment he steps into her tiny home, everything feels strange, because this man isn't just tired or confused, he doesn't even remember his own name. And when her little girl calls him Daddy by mistake, he reacts like someone running from a past too dark to speak about. Then, just as the mum starts to trust him, she finds a burned wallet in the backyard, with a picture of a billionaire who vanished after someone tried to kill him. And the man in her living room looks exactly like him. Suddenly, neighbors are watching. Dark cars are slowing down, and danger is creeping closer to her door, all because she let one lost man stay for one night. Now she has to ask herself, did she rescue an innocent man in trouble? Or bring a deadly secret into her home that could destroy everything she loves? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The bitter mountain wind howled through the darkened Colorado evening, whipping against Jenna Clark's old sedan as she steered carefully along the winding road. Her shoulders ached from her 8-hour shift at May's Diner, where she'd spent the day serving plates of meatloaf and refilling endless cups of coffee. Through the rearview mirror, she caught glimpses of Alice curled up in the back seat, her daughter's small frame wrapped in the purple jacket they'd found at the thrift store last month. "Almost home, baby girl," Jenna whispered, though Alice was sound asleep, her breath fogging the window beside her. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty road ahead. Pine trees swayed in the wind, their shadows dancing across the pavement. Jenna turned up the heat a notch, trying to ward off the chill that seemed to seep through every crack in the old car. That's when she saw him. A figure stumbled along the side of the road, weaving dangerously close to the ditch. Jenna's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she instinctively swerved, her heart jumping into her throat. The car's tires crunched on the gravel shoulder as she brought it to a stop. "Lord have mercy," she breathed, watching through the windshield as the man staggered a few more steps before dropping to his knees. Everything her mama had ever taught her about being careful, about not talking to strangers, about protecting herself and Alice, screamed in her head. But something else, that still small voice she'd learned to trust, whispered that she couldn't just drive away. Jenna glanced back at Alice, still peacefully sleeping, then grabbed her phone from her purse. She stepped out of the car, keeping the door open so she could hear if Alice stirred. "Sir?" she called out, maintaining a safe distance. "Are you all right?" The man lifted his head, and Jenna gasped. Even in the dim light, she could see the bruising on his face, the confusion in his eyes. His expensive-looking suit was torn and dirty, as if he'd been in some kind of fight or accident. His voice was rough, uncertain. "I don't know where I am." Jenna took a careful step closer, her phone gripped tightly in her hand. "You're just outside of Pine Grove. Do you need me to call someone for you?" The man's face crumpled in concentration, then fear. I can't remember. Why can't I remember?" The raw panic in his voice struck something in Jenna's heart. She'd heard that same fear in her own voice, years ago, when she'd fled her marriage with nothing but Alice and 2 suitcases, terrified and unsure where to go. "My name," he said, looking up at her with desperate eyes. "I can't even remember my name." The wind gusted harder, and the man shivered violently. Jenna looked back at her car, where Alice slept on, then at the stranger who seemed so lost and broken. She thought of the many times strangers had helped her when she'd needed it most, the church ladies who'd taken her in, the diner owner who'd given her a job without references. "Listen," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I have a couch. It's not much, but it's warm, and you look like you need medical attention. I can help you figure this out in the morning, but right now, you need to get out of this cold." The man stared at her, confusion mingling with gratitude. "Why would you help me?" Jenna managed a small smile. Because somebody once helped me when I needed it. Can you walk? He nodded, struggling to his feet. Jenna stayed close enough to steady him if needed, but maintained enough distance to feel safe. As they approached the car, she opened the back door on the opposite side from Alice. The drive to her small rental house was silent, except for Alice's soft breathing and the occasional groan from the man as they hit bumps in the road. Jenna's mind raced with questions and second thoughts, but each time she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the lost look in the man's eyes, she knew she couldn't have left him there. Their rental house was small, with peeling paint and creaky steps, but it was home. Jenna carried Alice inside first, her daughter barely stirring as she was transferred to her bed. She tucked the covers around her and kissed her forehead before returning to help the stranger. In the light of the living room, his injuries looked worse. A nasty bruise spread across his left temple, and his hands were scraped raw. He sank onto the couch as if his legs could no longer hold him. "I'll get you some water," Jenna said, moving to the kitchen. She returned with a glass and some ibuprofen. "I know it's not much, but it might help with the pain." The man took the pills with shaking hands. "Thank you. I wish I could tell you who I am." Jenna studied him for a moment. Despite his disheveled state, there was something gentle about him, something vulnerable that didn't match his expensive clothes and well-manicured hands. "Well," she said, crossing to the hall closet, "we have to call you something. How about Evan? You look like an Evan to me." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Evan," he repeated, as if testing the name. That's kind of you." Jenna pulled out her mother's old quilt, the one with the intricate star pattern she'd sewn by hand. She'd always said it was meant for helping others feel at home. "Here," she said, draping it over him. "Try to get some rest. We can figure things out in the morning." The man, Evan, ran his fingers over the soft fabric. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just rest," Jenna said, gathering her purse and keys. She hesitated, then added, "I'm Jenna, by the way. Jenna Clark." She backed away toward her bedroom, watching as his eyes grew heavy with exhaustion. At her door, she turned the lock, not just for her safety, but for Alice's too. Yet as she changed into her night clothes, she found herself adding him to her nightly prayers. "Lord," she whispered, sitting on the edge of her bed, "I don't know if I did the right thing tonight, but please watch over that man out there, and if I made a mistake, well, just keep us safe until morning." The wind continued to howl outside her window, but somehow Jenna felt at peace with her decision. As she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that this night would mark the beginning of something important, though she had no way of knowing just how much her act of kindness would change all their lives. The morning sun filtered through the worn curtains of Jenna's small kitchen, carrying with it an unexpected aroma. Still groggy from sleep, she blinked in confusion at the sizzling sounds coming from beyond her bedroom door. Her heart jumped. "Alice!" She quickly unlocked her door and rushed out, only to freeze at the sight before her. Evan stood at the stove, spatula in hand, expertly flipping eggs with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Alice sat at their small kitchen table, swinging her legs and chatting away as if having a stranger cook breakfast was the most natural thing in the world. "Good morning, Mommy." Alice beamed, her backpack already packed and ready beside her chair. "Mr. Evan is making eggs. He found the peppers in the fridge and everything." Jenna's mouth opened and closed, unsure how to respond. The man she'd rescued last night had somehow transformed from a confused, injured stranger into a chef. His bruises were still visible, but his movements were precise and confident. "I hope you don't mind," he said, turning to face her with an apologetic smile. "I wanted to thank you for your kindness, and cooking seemed familiar somehow. He paused, a flash of frustration crossing his face. Even if I can't remember where I learned to do it. Jenna approached cautiously, taking in the neat workspace and the delicious smell of perfectly seasoned eggs. You didn't have to do this. Please, it's the least I could do. He served up 3 plates with practiced grace, adding a small garnish to each one. Though I have to admit, finding things in your kitchen felt strangely natural, like muscle memory. They settled around the table, and Jenna watched in amazement as Alice immediately engaged their guest in conversation about her homework. The little girl pulled out her French workbook, struggling with a particular phrase. I don't know any French, Evan said apologetically, leaning over to look at the page. Then, without missing a beat, he commented, Ah, mais c'est simple, ma petite. Tu dois juste inverser l'ordre des mots. The kitchen fell silent. Evan blinked, looking as startled as Jenna felt. I don't know how I knew that, he stammered, running a hand through his hair. It just came out. Alice clapped her hands in delight. That was so cool! You speak French just like Madame Bernard at school! Jenna observed the interaction with growing fascination. Whoever this man was, he clearly had education and skills that went far beyond the confused stranger she'd found on the road. Yet there was something genuine about his surprise at his own abilities that made her believe his memory loss was real. As they ate, Alice chattered happily about school and her friends, seemingly unbothered by the unusual situation. Then, between bites of perfectly scrambled eggs, she dropped the bombshell that made both adults choke on their breakfast. Mr. Evan, Mommy says you're my daddy now. Jenna's fork clattered against her plate. Alice, I never said that. But you said he could stay the night, Alice pointed out with 8-year-old logic. And Tommy at school says that when grown-ups stay the night, they're like new daddies. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Evan started to chuckle, a warm, genuine sound that somehow made the moment less awkward. Well, that's quite a promotion from stranger on the couch, he said gently. Jenna felt her cheeks burning. Alice, honey, that's not... Mr. Evan is just staying with us temporarily while he... She trailed off, unsure how to explain the complicated situation to her daughter. It's okay, Evan said softly. Children have a way of simplifying things, don't they? His smile was kind, with no trace of mockery or discomfort. The morning continued with a strange sort of domesticity that should have felt wrong, but somehow didn't. Evan helped Alice pack her lunch, while Jenna gathered her work uniform, and soon it was time to walk to the bus stop. The 3 of them walked together down the quiet street, Alice skipping ahead and pointing out important landmarks to Evan. The big oak tree where she'd found a bird's nest, the crack in the sidewalk that looked like a smile, the house with the friendly golden retriever. As they waited for the bus, Jenna noticed how naturally Evan interacted with Alice, answering her endless questions with patience and genuine interest. When the yellow school bus pulled up, Alice gave them both huge hugs before bouncing up the steps, waving until she was out of sight. Walking back to the house, Jenna's mind wrestled with what to do next. The logical thing would be to call the police, report finding him, let the proper authorities handle it. But something held her back. Maybe it was the way he'd been so gentle with Alice, or how lost he still looked when he thought no one was watching. I should probably call someone, she said finally, as they reached her front porch. The police might be able to help figure out who you are. Evan's face tightened with what looked like fear. Could we wait? Just one more day? He looked down at his hands. I keep getting flashes of something, but it's all jumbled. Maybe if I had a little more time. Jenna studied him for a long moment. Her instincts, which had rarely led her wrong, were telling her to trust him. One more day, she agreed finally. But then we need to figure this out properly. I have to work a double shift today. Will you be okay here? The relief on his face was evident. Thank you, Jenna. I don't know why, but the thought of involving authorities right now. He shuddered slightly. I'll be fine. Maybe being alone will help me remember something. As Jenna got ready for work, she found herself wondering about the mysterious man in her kitchen, who could cook gourmet eggs and speak French, but couldn't remember his own name. One more day, she told herself. One more day to help him find his way back to whoever he was before she found him on that dark road. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Jenna's front yard as she returned home between shifts to check on her unexpected houseguest. The sight that greeted her made her pause. Evan was on his hands and knees on her porch, tools spread around him as he methodically repaired the broken step that had been wobbling for months. I found some supplies in your shed, he explained without looking up, his hands moving with practiced precision. Hope you don't mind. I noticed Alice almost tripped this morning, and it needed fixing. Jenna watched in amazement as he worked, noting how his movements seemed automatic, like muscle memory. You just happen to know how to fix wooden steps. He paused, frowning slightly. I guess so. It's strange. I don't remember learning this, but my hands seem to know what to do. The crunch of tires on gravel interrupted their conversation. A police cruiser pulled up, and Sheriff Dalka stepped out, his familiar figure cutting a reassuring presence in his tan uniform. Jenna felt her heart skip. She'd completely forgotten this was his usual day for neighborhood check-ins. Afternoon, Jenna, the sheriff called, his eyes immediately fixing on Evan. Got yourself some help with home repairs? Oh, yes, Jenna said quickly, trying to keep her voice steady. This is Evan. He's staying with us for a few days. Sheriff Dalka approached the porch, his trained gaze taking in every detail. Nice to meet you, Evan. That's some skilled work you're doing there. You a professional carpenter? I'm not sure, Evan admitted, standing up and wiping his hands on his jeans. Something in his posture had changed. He seemed more tense, almost ready to bolt. The sheriff's expression shifted subtly. Not sure. That's an interesting answer. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. You know, you look mighty familiar. Been seeing this face all over the news lately. He unfolded what turned out to be a missing person poster. Jenna felt her breath catch as she saw the photograph. A man in an expensive suit, his face clean-shaven and hair perfectly styled, but unmistakably similar to the man standing on her porch. The name beneath read, Damien Holt, CEO of Holt Industries. There was a car accident up in the mountains. Sheriff Dalka continued, his voice carefully neutral. Pretty nasty one. Some folks are saying it wasn't an accident at all. Mr. Holt here disappeared from the scene before emergency services arrived. That was 3 days ago. Evan had gone pale, his hands gripping the porch railing. That's not me. I'm not him. I can't be. No? The sheriff studied him carefully. Mind telling me who you are, then? I told you I'm Evan, he insisted, but his voice shook slightly. I'm just helping Jenna with some repairs, that's all. Jenna found herself stepping forward, placing herself slightly between the two men. Sheriff, he's been nothing but kind and helpful. He fixed my kitchen sink this morning, and he's been wonderful with Alice. I'm sure he has been, Dalka said gently. But Jenna, if this is who I think it is, there might be people looking for him. Dangerous people. I need to know what's going on here. I'm not that man, Evan repeated, more firmly this time, but Jenna could see the fear in his eyes. I'm sorry, I need some air. He turned and walked quickly around the side of the house, disappearing into the backyard. Sheriff Dalka watched him go, then turned to Jenna. How long has he been here? Just since last night, Jenna admitted. I found him on Mountain Road. He was confused, hurt. I couldn't just leave him there." The sheriff sighed. "Your heart's always been bigger than your sense of self-preservation, Jenna. Look, I'm not going to push this right now, but you need to be careful. If that is Damien Holt, and if someone really did try to kill him—" He left the sentence hanging. "I understand," Jenna said quietly. "But Sheriff, I really don't think he means any harm. You should see him with Alice. He helped her with her French homework this morning, though he swears he doesn't know the language." "That's interesting," Dalka mused. "Because Damien Holt spent 5 years running his company's Paris office." He handed Jenna the missing person poster. "Just keep your eyes open, okay? And call me if anything feels wrong." After the sheriff left, Jenna found Evan in the backyard, methodically organizing her tool shed. His hands moved with precise efficiency, but his face was troubled. The shelf brackets were loose. He said without turning around, "I tightened them, and I'm reorganizing everything by function and frequency of use. It'll be more efficient this way." He paused. "I don't know how I know that's the right way to do it. Just like I don't know why I can speak French or fix steps or—" His voice cracked slightly. "Are you him?" Jenna asked softly. "Damien Holt." His shoulders slumped. "I honestly don't know, Jenna. When I saw that picture, it was like looking at a stranger, but—" He turned to face her, his eyes haunted. "What if I am? What if someone really did try to kill me? What kind of person was I, that someone would want to do that?" Jenna watched as he absently picked up a broken garden trowel, his fingers automatically finding the problem with the handle and beginning to fix it. Everything about him spoke of expensive training and education, from his perfect posture to his elegant movements, yet there was genuine fear and confusion in his eyes. "I think," she said carefully, "that right now you're the person who fixed my step so my daughter wouldn't trip. You're the person who made us breakfast and helped with homework. Maybe who you were before doesn't matter as much as who you're choosing to be right now." He looked down at the trowel in his hands, seemingly surprised to find he'd fixed it. "I keep doing things without thinking. It's like my hands remember even if my mind doesn't." He placed the tool carefully on the newly organized shelf. "What if the sheriff is right? What if I'm putting you and Alice in danger just by being here?" The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Jenna's backyard as she stood at the kitchen window, watching Alice play near the drainage ditch that marked the edge of their property. The little girl had been fascinated by the area since Evan had appeared there, treating it like her own personal adventure zone. Jenna smiled, seeing her daughter's pigtails bounce as she explored, while keeping one eye on the pot of simmering chicken soup on the stove. "Do you need help with anything?" Evan asked from behind her, making her jump slightly. Despite his uncertain state, he moved with an almost silent grace that seemed ingrained. "You could chop these vegetables?" Jenna suggested, gesturing to the cutting board. She watched as his hands automatically took up the knife with practiced precision, his movements swift and sure despite his claimed memory loss. "Mommy! Mommy!" Alice's excited voice rang out from the back door. "Look what I found!" She burst into the kitchen, her shoes trailing mud and her hands clutching something dark and weathered. "Alice Clark, what did I say about shoes in the house?" Jenna scolded gently, but her daughter was too excited to pay attention. "It was buried in the mud by the ditch. It's like treasure." Alice held up what appeared to be a badly burned leather wallet, its edges charred and its surface caked with dried mud. Evan's knife clattered against the cutting board. Jenna glanced at him, noticing how his face had suddenly gone pale. "Can we open it?" Alice asked, already working her small fingers into the wallet's stiff compartments. "Maybe there's money inside." "Alice, honey, that's not—" Jenna started, but stopped as several items fell onto the kitchen table. The first was a security card, its plastic surface partially melted, but still clearly showing a corporate logo. Holt Industries, emblazoned above a barcode. Next came a photograph, its edges singed, but the image still clear. A younger version of the man they knew as Evan, wearing an expensive suit, shaking hands with two serious-looking men in dark suits. The photo's caption read, "CEO Damien Holt finalizes security contract with Federal Task Force." But it was the last item that seemed to affect Evan the most. A crumpled piece of paper, clearly torn from a child's notebook. On it was a crude crayon drawing showing stick figures, one running, others chasing with angry faces. Above them, in a child's wobbly handwriting, were the words, "Bad Guys." Evan staggered backward, his face draining of all color. He gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, his knuckles white. I remember," he gasped. Jenna quickly moved to his side, steadying him as his legs seemed to give way. She guided him to a chair while Alice watched with wide, worried eyes. "Is Mr. Evan okay?" she whispered. "Gunshots!" Evan choked out, his voice raw with terror. The screech of tires, dark road. His breathing became ragged as the memories assaulted him. A voice, a man's voice. "Make sure he doesn't live." He pressed his hands against his temples, trembling violently. "Alice, sweetheart," Jenna said calmly, though her heart was racing. "Go to your room for a little while, okay?" Once Alice had reluctantly left, Jenna knelt beside Evan's chair, keeping one hand on his shoulder. She could feel the tremors running through his body as the fragments of memory continued to surface. "They were waiting. Knew my route," he muttered, his eyes unfocused. "The drawing, Sophie's drawing, had to warn them." His words dissolved into harsh, panicked breathing. "Just breathe," Jenna instructed softly, squeezing his shoulder. "You're safe here. Just breathe with me." She demonstrated slow, deep breaths until his breathing began to match hers. After several minutes, his trembling subsided slightly. He reached for the burned wallet with shaking hands, turning it over carefully. "This was mine," he said quietly. "I remember now. I always kept it in my left inside pocket. Company protocol." Jenna picked up the security card, studying the partial photo visible on its surface. Even damaged, the resemblance was undeniable. The same strong jaw, the same eyes, though they looked harder in the photo, lacking the gentleness she'd come to know. "You really are him, aren't you?" she said softly. "Damien Holt." He stared at the items spread across her kitchen table, the physical evidence of a life he'd forgotten. "Yes," he whispered, the admission seeming to cost him greatly. "But I still don't remember everything. Just pieces. Fragments." He picked up the child's drawing, his fingers tracing the crude figures. "Someone tried to kill me, and I think I know why." Jenna looked at the man sitting at her kitchen table, the billionaire CEO who had cooked her breakfast, fixed her steps, and helped her daughter with homework. The man who had shown up broken and lost on her road, and who now sat trembling as his past caught up with him. In that moment, she realized that her simple act of kindness had entangled her in something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. The soup on the stove continued to simmer, forgotten, as the kitchen filled with the weight of this revelation. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the yard where Alice had found the wallet, shadows that suddenly seemed more menacing than before. Jenna glanced at her daughter's closed bedroom door, then back at the man she'd known as Evan, now confirmed to be Damien Holt, and understood that her life had irrevocably changed the moment she'd stopped to help a stranger on that dark mountain road. The kitchen felt different in the late hours, smaller somehow, more intimate. The overhead light had been dimmed, leaving only the soft glow from the counter lamp to illuminate the two figures sitting at the worn wooden table. The wall clock's gentle ticking marked time's steady march toward midnight. Jenna wrapped her hands around a mug of chamomile tea, more for comfort than warmth. Across from her, Damien, she still couldn't think of him as anything but Evan, stared down at the burned wallet and its contents spread before him like puzzle pieces of a life he couldn't fully remember. "It's strange," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper to avoid waking Alice. "Looking at these things, I know they're mine, but it's like watching a movie about someone else's life. I recognize the face in the photo, but I don't remember being there, shaking those men's hands." Jenna studied his face in the dim light. The confusion and fear she saw there seemed at odds with the confident CEO in the photograph. "What do you remember?" she asked gently. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, wincing slightly as his fingers brushed against the healing cut near his temple. "Fragments mostly. The crash. The sound of metal crushing metal. Someone shouting orders." He picked up the child's drawing again, his fingers trembling. This feels important. Like I was trying to protect something. Someone." The clock chimed 11, making them both jump slightly outside the wind had picked up, whistling through the gaps in the old window frames. Jenna pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. "I think," he continued, choosing his words carefully, "I was running from something. Something dangerous." His eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of guilt and concern. "Which means I'm putting you and Alice in danger by staying here." Jenna felt her heart constrict at the thought. Over just these few days, she'd watched this man cook breakfast with her daughter, fix things around her house, and show nothing but gentleness despite his own trauma. The thought of sending him away made her physically ache. "Maybe I should leave," he said, pushing back his chair. "It's not fair to risk your safety, either of you. You've already done more than enough by helping a stranger." "Stop," Jenna said, reaching across the table to catch his hand. His skin was warm against hers, and she felt him freeze at the contact. "It's nearly midnight. There's nothing but cold and darkness out there. But what if whoever tried to kill me comes looking? What if—" "Then we'll deal with that if it happens," she interrupted, her voice firm but gentle. "My mama always said that fear of what might happen shouldn't stop you from doing what's right in the present moment." He looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why risk so much for someone you don't even know?" Jenna was quiet for a moment, thinking about her own journey, about the times she'd needed help and found it in unexpected places. "Because I don't abandon people who need help," she whispered finally. "That's not who I am. That's not who I want Alice to see me being." The tension in his shoulders eased slightly, but the worry remained in his eyes. "One more night," she said, squeezing his hand before letting go. "But we need to be careful. No more working outside where anyone can see you. And tomorrow we'll figure out our next steps." He nodded, gathering the wallet and its contents with careful movements. "Thank you," he said, the words carrying the weight of everything he couldn't express. Later, after he'd settled onto the couch with her mother's quilt, Jenna found herself lingering in the doorway between the living room and the hallway. The small lamp on the end table cast a gentle glow across his sleeping form, highlighting the fading bruises on his face and the worry lines that remained even in sleep. She thought about coincidences and divine intervention, about how sometimes the most important moments in life came disguised as inconveniences or even dangers. Her mother had always said that God worked in mysterious ways, that sometimes he placed people in your path for reasons you couldn't yet understand. Looking at the man on her couch, this confused, gentle, dangerous puzzle of a person. Jenna couldn't help but wonder if this was one of those moments. She watched his chest rise and fall with steady breaths, saw how one hand clutched the edge of her mother's quilt like a child seeking comfort, and felt something shift in her heart. Whatever tomorrow might bring, whatever dangers might be lurking in the shadows of his past, she knew she'd made the right choice in letting him stay. Sometimes, she realized, the most important acts of faith were the small ones, like offering shelter to a stranger on a cold night, or believing in someone's goodness despite the mysteries surrounding them. The clock in the kitchen struck midnight, its chimes floating softly through the quiet house. Jenna took one last look at her sleeping guest, offering up a silent prayer for his protection, for Alice's safety, for guidance in the days to come. Then she turned away, heading to her own room, where she knew she'd lie awake for hours, wondering what God's plan was in bringing this man into their lives. The morning sun painted golden stripes across Jenna's small kitchen table as she watched Evan help Alice with her math homework. Her daughter sat perched on her knees in the chair, leaning toward him as he explained multiplication with patient words and gentle encouragement. "See, if you have 4 groups of 3 cookies each, that's the same as 3 groups of 4 cookies," he explained, using the chocolate chip cookies Jenna had baked the night before as visual aids. "Either way, you end up with 12 cookies total." Alice's face scrunched up in concentration, then brightened. "Oh, so 4 times 3 is the same as 3 times 4? "Exactly." He smiled, and Jenna noticed how the expression transformed his entire face, erasing the worried lines that usually creased his forehead. "That's called the commutative property, but really it just means it doesn't matter which number goes first." Alice interrupted, bouncing slightly in her seat. "You've got it." He handed her a cookie as a reward, and her delighted giggle filled the kitchen. Jenna sipped her coffee, trying to reconcile this gentle teacher with the man who might be a billionaire CEO on the run. The way he interacted with Alice seemed so natural, so unforced. It was hard to imagine him in a corporate boardroom making million-dollar decisions. "Mommy, can Evan help me with homework every morning?" Alice asked, carefully writing down her answers in her notebook. Before Jenna could respond, Evan spoke up. "Hey, why don't you go get your backpack ready? The bus will be here soon." As Alice skipped off to her room, Jenna caught his eye. "Thank you," she said softly. "She struggles with math sometimes, but you made it seem easy." He shrugged, gathering the remaining cookies. It just felt right, like muscle memory, I guess, though I don't remember ever teaching anyone before. After seeing Alice off to the bus, Jenna prepared for her shift at the diner. She found Evan examining the loose boards on her front porch with a focused expression. "I noticed these were wobbly yesterday," he said, testing one with his foot. "I can fix them while you're at work. If that's okay?" Jenna hesitated. Having him work outside might draw attention, but the porch did need repairs. "Just be careful," she finally said. "If anyone comes by, I'll go inside right away," he promised. "Don't worry." Throughout her shift at the diner, Jenna found her thoughts drifting home. She worried about leaving him alone, about whether she was being foolish to trust him. But every time she remembered how he'd helped Alice with her homework, how carefully he'd explained the math problems, her doubts softened. When she returned home in the late afternoon, she almost didn't recognize her own house. The porch had been completely repaired, its boards solid and even. The gutters, which had been overflowing with leaves, were clean. She found Evan sweeping the front walkway, his movements precise and efficient. "I hope you don't mind," he said when he saw her. "I fixed the cabinet in the kitchen too, the one with the broken hinge. My hand seemed to know what to do, even if my mind doesn't remember learning how." Jenna walked up the newly secured porch steps, testing their stability. "This is amazing," she said honestly. "But how did you know how to do all this?" He leaned on the broom, his expression troubled. "I don't know, it's like muscle memory, maybe? My body remembers skills my mind can't access. It's frustrating, actually. Why can I fix a cabinet but not remember my own name?" Later that evening, after Alice had helped set the table, they sat down to a simple dinner of spaghetti. The familiar scent of garlic bread filled the kitchen, and Jenna noticed how comfortable it felt, the three of them sharing a meal together. "Did you always want to work at a diner?" Evan asked, twirling pasta onto his fork. Jenna shook her head. "I wanted to be a nurse, actually, but life had other plans." She glanced at Alice, who was carefully cutting her spaghetti into smaller pieces. "Sometimes dreams have to wait." "But not forever, right, Mummy?" Alice piped up. "You always say we should never give up on our dreams." "That's right, baby." Jenna smiled at her daughter's perfect recall of her words. "What about you?" she asked Evan. "Do you have any dreams? Even if you can't remember your past, surely you must have hopes for the future?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I dream of feeling safe," he finally said. "Of not being afraid that every shadow holds a threat, and—" he glanced between Jenna and Alice, "of belonging somewhere, to something." The honesty in his voice touched something deep in Jenna's heart. "Everyone deserves to feel safe," she said softly. "To have a place where they belong." After dinner and dishes, Alice convinced them to watch a movie together. They gathered in the small living room, Alice insisting they all share blankets like a real family. Jenna noticed how Evan tensed at the word, then gradually relaxed as the movie played. The animated film filled the room with color and music, but Jenna found herself watching her companions instead. Alice had curled up between them on the couch, her head eventually drooping onto Evan's shoulder as she grew sleepy. He sat perfectly still, as if afraid to disturb her, his face soft with an emotion Jenna couldn't quite name. The house felt different somehow, warmer, more complete. It wasn't just the fixed porch or the clean gutters or the repaired cabinet. It was the sound of three people breathing in harmony, the shared warmth of blankets, the comfortable silence between scenes. It was the way Evan had slipped into their daily routine, as if he'd always been there, filling spaces Jenna hadn't even realized were empty. As the movie's credits rolled, with Alice sound asleep against Evan's shoulder, Jenna realized that whatever dangers his past might hold, whatever truth lay behind his lost memories, right now, in this moment, everything felt right. It felt like home. The morning sun cast long shadows across Jenna's front yard as Evan worked on the porch railing. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, though his mind still couldn't explain how he knew what to do. The early autumn air carried a hint of pine from the surrounding mountains, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed 9 o'clock. He positioned another nail, the familiar weight of the hammer comfortable in his grip. The steady rhythm of his work had become almost meditative over the past few days. Tap, tap, drive the nail home. Each repair felt like a small way to repay Jenna's kindness, to prove he deserved the trust she'd placed in him. The railing had worked loose over the years, wobbling dangerously whenever anyone leaned against it. Evan had noticed Alice using it for balance when she climbed the steps, and something protective in him had immediately wanted to fix it. He lined up the hammer with practiced precision, drew back. The world shifted. Suddenly, he wasn't on Jenna's porch anymore. He stood in a vast boardroom, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Dark wooden walls rose around him, and faces, angry, accusing faces, surrounded a long conference table. "You can't ignore this anymore, Damien. A man slammed a thick folder onto the polished surface. Papers scattered, headlines visible in bold type. Financial irregularities. Missing funds. Corporate corruption. They're going to kill thousands of people. His own voice, unfamiliar yet undeniably his, echoed with desperation. "We have to stop!" The hammer clattered against the porch boards, snapping him back to the present. His legs gave way, and he barely managed to sink down onto the steps rather than fall. His heart hammered against his ribs, and cold sweat beaded on his forehead despite the mild morning air. The screen door creaked behind him, followed by quick footsteps. "Are you all right?" Jenna's voice was filled with concern. "I heard something fall." She broke off when she saw his face. "Oh my goodness." She quickly sat beside him, one hand steadying his shoulder. "Another memory?" He nodded, unable to speak for a moment as he tried to slow his breathing. Jenna waited patiently, her presence calm and grounding. Finally, he managed to whisper, "I saw a boardroom. There was an argument, something about corruption, about people being hurt." He pressed his palms against his eyes. I think I might not have been a good person, Jenna." The hand on his shoulder squeezed gently. "Look at me," she said softly. He lowered his hands, turning to meet her warm brown eyes. "The man I've known these past few days. The one who helps my daughter with her homework, who fixed my house without being asked, who shows nothing but kindness, that man is good." She smiled slightly. "Whatever mistakes you might have made before, they don't define who you are now. Character isn't built on yesterday's choices, but on the ones we make today." "How can you be so sure?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Faith," she answered simply. "Not just in God, but in people's capacity to change, to grow, to become better." She glanced at her watch. "Speaking of faith, would you like to come to church with us today? No pressure, but you're welcome to join us." The invitation surprised him. I don't know if I've ever been to church before." "Then today could be your first time," she said with a gentle smile. "Sometimes new beginnings are exactly what we need." Hours later, Evan found himself sitting in a small wooden pew, Alice between him and Jenna. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the worn carpet. The church wasn't large or fancy, but it had a warmth to it, a lived-in feeling of welcome that reminded him of Jenna's house. The congregation stood as the first hymn began. Alice held up her hymnal so he could share, though he didn't know the words. But as the music swelled around him, dozens of voices lifted in harmony. Something deep inside him began to unwind. The tension he'd carried since waking up in that ditch started to ease. He closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. The words spoke of grace, of second chances, of a love that never gave up on anyone. Without realizing it, he found himself swaying slightly to the rhythm, his shoulders relaxing for what felt like the first time in days. When he opened his eyes again, he caught Jenna watching him with a soft expression. She didn't say anything, but her smile held understanding. Alice leaned against his arm, still singing in her clear child's voice, and for a moment everything felt peaceful. The morning's frightening flashback seemed distant, less threatening. The hymn ended, but its echo remained in his heart. Whatever his past held, whatever mistakes or crimes or corruption might be hidden in his lost memories, right here, in this moment, he felt something he hadn't expected to find. Hope. Hope that Jenna was right about the possibility of change. Hope that who he was becoming mattered more than who he had been. As the service continued, Evan found himself drawn into the quiet rhythms of worship. The prayers, the scripture readings, the gentle murmur of amen from the congregation. It all felt like a balm to his troubled spirit. He didn't understand everything, couldn't remember if any of it was familiar, but the peace he found in those moments felt real and profound. When the final hymn began, he didn't need Alice to hold up the hymnal. He simply closed his eyes and let the music carry him, grateful for this unexpected sanctuary, for the woman who had shown him kindness when he needed it most, and for the chance to become someone new. The early morning chill crept through Jenna's small house, making her pull her sweater tighter as she prepared breakfast. 2 days had passed since their first church visit, and the temperature had dropped unexpectedly overnight. She frowned at the old heater in the corner, which sputtered weakly before falling silent again. "Not now," she muttered, giving it a frustrated tap. The ancient unit had been temperamental for months, but she hadn't been able to afford a repair service. Evan appeared in the doorway, already dressed and alert. "Something wrong?" "Just this old heater acting up again." Jenna sighed, turning back to the stove. "I'll have to dig out the extra blankets until I can save up for—" She stopped as Evan walked over to the unit, kneeling beside it with focused interest. His hands moved over the metal casing with surprising confidence. "Do you have any tools?" he asked. 20 minutes later, he had the heater disassembled on the kitchen floor, working with steady precision. Jenna watched in amazement as his fingers traced wires and connections, his face showing the same concentrated expression she'd seen when he helped Alice with math problems. "The thermocoupler is worn out," he said, pointing to a small component. "And there's dust built up in the vents. I can clean it now, but we should pick up a replacement part from the hardware store." "You know about heaters too?" Jenna asked, unable to hide her surprise. He paused, that familiar, confused look crossing his face. I guess I do. It just feels natural, like I've done this hundreds of times before." By the time Alice came downstairs for breakfast, warm air was flowing steadily through the house again. The little girl beamed at Evan as if he'd performed magic. Later that morning, after Alice left for school, Evan discovered a pile of scrap lumber behind the garage. His eyes lit up with purpose, and he spent the next few hours measuring, cutting, and assembling pieces with careful attention to detail. The rhythmic sound of hammering filled the air. When Alice returned from school, she found a beautiful wooden bookshelf waiting in her room, perfectly sized for her growing collection of library books. She threw her arms around Evan's waist, her face glowing with delight. "It's just like the one in my favorite reading spot at school," she exclaimed. "How did you know?" Evan smiled, patting her head gently. "Just lucky, I guess." That afternoon, while Evan was organizing Alice's books on the new shelves, a knock at the door announced Mrs. Wallace, Jenna's elderly neighbor. The woman's silver hair was neatly pinned back, and her bright eyes sparkled with curiosity as Jenna introduced Evan. "So you're the mysterious handyman I've been hearing about," Mrs. Wallace said, studying him intently. After a moment, her face softened into a warm smile. "Well, would you look at those gentle eyes? You've got a good soul, young man. I can tell these things, you know. Mrs. Wallace has a sixth sense about people," Jenna explained, trying not to smile at Evan's slightly flustered expression. "Oh, hush." Mrs. Wallace waved her hand. "I just pay attention. And what I'm seeing right now is someone who belongs right where he is." She patted Evan's arm. "Keep fixing things, dear. Sometimes the best healing starts with our hands and works its way to our hearts." The older woman's words seemed to strike something deep in Evan. The next day, when Jenna mentioned her volunteer work at the local Veterans Center, he asked to join her. The center was a modest building, its walls lined with military photos and American flags. As they walked in, Evan moved with unexpected ease among the veterans. He seemed to know instinctively how to approach the quieter ones, the ones whose eyes held shadows of past battles. An older veteran named Mike sat alone in the corner, his hands shaking slightly as he stared at nothing. Evan pulled up a chair beside him, his presence calm and steady. "Rough day?" he asked quietly. Mike nodded, his jaw tight. "Can't shake it sometimes, you know." "Tell me about your unit," Evan said, and something in his tone made Mike look up. For the next hour they talked about service, about brotherhood, about the weight of command decisions. Evan didn't remember his own past, but his responses showed an innate understanding that could only come from experience. Later, as they drove home, Jenna noticed Evan looking thoughtful. "You were amazing with them," she said softly, "especially Mike." "It felt familiar," he admitted. "The way they carry themselves, the things they struggle with. I think maybe I had people depending on me before, important responsibilities." He turned to look at her. "Maybe I wasn't just some corrupt businessman. Maybe there's more to remember." Jenna felt her heart twist at the hope in his voice. Over the past days, she'd found herself watching him more and more. The gentle way he listened to Alice's stories, the quiet competence in his hands as he fixed things around the house, the genuine concern he showed for others. Each new revelation of his character made it harder to imagine him as the cold-hearted CEO from the missing persons poster. But these growing feelings frightened her. What would happen when his memory returned? Would he still be the same person who built her daughter bookshelves and comforted veterans? Or would he return to a life of boardrooms and power, leaving them as nothing more than a brief chapter in his story? As they pulled into the driveway, Alice ran out to greet them, waving a drawing she'd made at school. Evan lifted her up with practiced ease, examining her artwork with exaggerated seriousness while she giggled. Jenna watched them, her heart full and aching at the same time. For now, she told herself, she would focus on the present, on the man who fixed broken things, who made her daughter laugh, who showed such gentle strength to troubled veterans. Tomorrow's worries could wait. Today she would simply be grateful for the unexpected blessing of his presence in their lives, however long it might last. The autumn sun was already setting when Jenna pulled into her driveway after her shift at the diner. Her shoulders ached from carrying heavy plates all day, and she couldn't help but smile thinking about the quiet evening ahead. Birthdays had become simple affairs since her mother passed, usually just a phone call from her aunt, and maybe a small cake shared with Alice. But as she approached her front door, something felt different. Through the window, she caught glimpses of movement and heard muffled giggles. When she turned the key in the lock, her heart wasn't prepared for what she found inside. Paper hearts in every shade of red and pink decorated the walls, dangling from strings and taped to surfaces. Some were clearly cut by Alice's 8-year-old hands, slightly crooked but full of love, while others showed Evan's precise craftsmanship. A banner stretched across the living room read, "Happy Birthday, Mommy," in Alice's careful lettering, decorated with glitter that had obviously spilled onto the floor below. "Surprise!" Alice burst out from behind the couch, nearly tripping in her excitement. "We made everything ourselves." Evan emerged from the kitchen, wearing an apron dusted with flour and wearing a sheepish grin. "Though I should warn you about the cupcakes. They're a bit artistic." The kitchen counter displayed a dozen cupcakes, each one tilting slightly to one side or the other, with frosting applied in enthusiastic if uneven swirls. The sight of them, clearly made with such earnest effort, brought tears to Jenna's eyes. "How did you even know it was my birthday?" she asked, dropping her purse and gathering Alice into a tight hug. "I saw it on your driver's license when you were looking for your insurance card yesterday," Alice admitted proudly. "And then I told Evan we had to do something special." Evan rubbed the back of his neck. I hope you don't mind. We wanted to give you a proper celebration. Mind? Jenna laughed, wiping her eyes. This is wonderful. But that's not even the best part. Alice bounced on her toes. Show her, Evan. Show her the special thing. Well, he said, taking Jenna's hand. You'll have to come outside for that. They led her to the front porch, where the old broken swing, the one that had hung useless and creaking for years, now stood restored. The wood had been sanded smooth and given a fresh coat of white paint. New chains gleamed in the evening light, and comfortable cushions in soft blue fabric invited someone to sit and rest. I noticed how you always looked at it, Evan explained softly, like you were remembering something. Jenna touched the swing gently, memories washing over her. My mother and I used to sit on this swing every evening when I was little. After she got sick, we'd bring out blankets and watch the stars. Her voice caught. I never thought I'd see it fixed. Try it out, Alice insisted, pushing her mother toward the swing. Jenna sat down, feeling the solid support beneath her, the gentle sway as Evan pushed it slightly. It was perfect, exactly as she remembered. They brought the cupcakes outside, lighting candles as the sky darkened to deep purple. Alice insisted on singing Happy Birthday 3 times, getting progressively sillier with each rendition until they were all laughing. These are actually really good, Jenna said, taking another bite of her lopsided cupcake. Evan measured everything exactly, Alice reported. He said baking is like science. Is that something else you remembered? Jenna asked him curiously. He shook his head. No, I just figured it had to be precise. Though I did somehow know that vanilla extract shouldn't be confused with vanilla beans. They shared stories as the stars began to appear. Alice told about the time she tried to teach their cat to dance. Jenna remembered birthday parties from her childhood, and Evan contributed silly jokes he'd learned from the veterans at the center. The evening wrapped them in warmth despite the cooling air, their laughter mixing with the chirp of crickets. When Alice's eyes began to droop, Jenna carried her inside to bed. The little girl insisted on one more happy birthday before finally drifting off, clutching her stuffed giraffe. Returning to the porch, Jenna found Evan had cleaned up the cupcake remnants and was sitting on the swing, looking up at the stars. She joined him, and they swayed gently in comfortable silence. Thank you, she said finally. This was more than I could have imagined. He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. Jenna, he said softly, I know there's still so much uncertainty about who I was, but being here, with you and Alice. He paused, choosing his words carefully. If I could choose between getting my old life back and having a future with you both, I'd choose you. Every time. The words hung in the cool night air between them. Jenna felt tears welling up again, but these were different from before. These were tears of hope, of possibility, of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Slowly she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, tentative at first, then deepening with shared longing and tenderness. When they finally pulled apart, Evan reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. They sat together on the swing, hands clasped, watching the stars wheel overhead. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The moment held all the words their hearts needed to say. The porch light flickered once, twice, then went dark, leaving them in the soft glow of starlight. But neither moved to fix it. Some moments were perfect exactly as they were. The morning dawned crisp and clear, sunlight streaming through Jenna's kitchen windows as she stood at the stove, flipping pancakes. The familiar rhythm of their new routine filled the small house with warmth. Alice at the table working on her multiplication tables, Evan pouring orange juice into 3 glasses, the coffee maker gurgling softly in the background. "Did you remember to pack your library books?" Jenna asked, sliding a perfectly golden pancake onto Alice's plate. "Yes, Mom," Alice said, not looking up from her homework. "Evan helped me find them all yesterday." Evan smiled, passing Jenna her coffee mug. Their fingers brushed, and the memory of last night's kiss on the porch made her cheeks warm. She turned back to the stove, hoping Alice hadn't noticed. The morning passed peacefully. Alice caught the bus. Evan tended to the garden he'd started in the backyard, and Jenna caught up on laundry before her afternoon shift at the diner. Everything felt wonderfully normal until just before lunch. Evan was washing soil from his hands at the kitchen sink when a black SUV cruised slowly past the house. Something about its tinted windows and deliberate pace made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He couldn't explain why, but his body tensed instinctively. "Jenna," he called softly, "come away from the window." She looked up from folding towels, concerned by his tone. "What's wrong?" Before he could answer, the same SUV passed by again, even slower this time. Evan felt his heart rate spike, though he couldn't explain why. Memory fragments flickered at the edges of his mind. Other black vehicles, urgent voices, danger. "I don't know," he admitted, moving to stand between Jenna and the window. "Something doesn't feel right." The afternoon crawled by with nervous energy. Evan insisted on picking Alice up from the bus stop himself, scanning the street constantly. Jenna called the diner and asked for the evening off, unable to shake the feeling of unease that had settled over their home. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard. Evan spotted movement at the edge of the property. His body went rigid. "Get away from the windows," he ordered sharply, surprising himself with the authority in his voice. Figures in tactical gear emerged from the growing darkness, moving with military precision. Before anyone could react, the yard erupted with activity. More agents appearing from all directions, weapons raised. "Damien Holt!" a commanding voice shouted. "This is Federal Agent Ramirez. We're here to protect you!" Alice screamed, dropping her coloring book. Jenna scooped her up instantly, holding her tight against her chest. Evan, or Damien, stood frozen, fragments of memory crashing through his mind like breaking glass. The front door burst open, and Agent Ramirez rushed in, his face intense but controlled. "Mr. Holt, we've been searching for you since the accident. You're a crucial witness in a federal case against the Meridian Syndicate. They tried to kill you to prevent your testimony." "I don't—" Damien struggled, pressing his palms against his temples. "I can't remember." "The memories will return," Ramirez said urgently. "But right now we need to move. They found you." As if to punctuate his words, a sharp crack split the air. The mailbox at the end of the driveway exploded in a shower of metal and paper, the sound making them all jump. "Sniper!" An agent outside shouted. 2 o'clock position." "Move, move, move!" Ramirez commanded, already herding them toward the door. Other agents formed a protective circle around them. Alice clung to Jenna, crying, "Mom, I'm scared." "Close your eyes, baby," Jenna whispered, her own voice shaking. "Just hold on to me." Damien's protective instincts surged. He positioned himself between the family and the windows as they hurried through the house. More shots rang out, shattering the kitchen window. Glass sprayed across the floor they had danced on just last night during Jenna's birthday celebration. Outside, an armored vehicle waited, its engine running. Agents guided them quickly across the yard, shields raised. Damien helped Jenna and Alice climb in first before jumping in behind them. Agent Ramirez slammed the door shut and signaled the driver. As they pulled away, Damien looked back through the bulletproof glass. The porch light on Jenna's house flickered erratically, casting strange shadows across the yard where they'd shared so many peaceful moments. The life they'd been building seemed to dim with each flicker, fading into the growing darkness behind them. Alice sobbed quietly against her mother's chest. Jenna stroked her daughter's hair, her other hand finding Damien's and gripping it tightly. His fingers interlaced with hers, holding on as if this small connection could keep their world from completely unraveling. Agent Ramirez spoke quietly into his radio, coordinating with other teams. The armored vehicle accelerated into the night, carrying them away from the only place that had felt like home since Damien's memories vanished. Behind them, the porch light gave one final flicker and went dark. The armored vehicle wound through darkened mountain roads for nearly 2 hours before pulling up to an unmarked compound, hidden behind tall security fences. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter, casting harsh shadows across the faces of armed agents standing guard. For Alice, who had finally drifted into an exhausted sleep against her mother's shoulder, the sudden brightness made her stir. "We're at a secure federal facility," Agent Ramirez explained, his voice softer than before. "You'll be safe here while we sort everything out." Inside, the safe house felt sterile and impersonal. All straight lines and blank walls, nothing like the warmth of Jenna's home. The common area held plain furniture and a small kitchen stocked with basic supplies. 3 bedrooms branched off a central hallway, each equipped with standard-issue bedding and simple furnishings. "I need to speak with Mr. Holt," Ramirez said, gesturing toward a makeshift interview room. "Mrs. Clark, there's a children's area where Alice can rest more comfortably." Jenna nodded, still holding Alice close. "Will someone explain what's happening? We deserve to know." "Everything will be explained," Ramirez assured her. "But first, we need Mr. Holt's statement while his memories are returning." Damien squeezed Jenna's hand before following Ramirez. The interview room contained only a table, 4 chairs, and a recording device. As they sat down, fragments of memory began flooding back. Board meetings, heated arguments, discovered documents that made his blood run cold. "Start from the beginning," Ramirez prompted, pressing record. "What do you remember?" Damien pressed his fingers to his temples, trying to organize the rushing thoughts. "Marcus Chen," he said suddenly, the name tasting bitter. "My CFO, I trusted him completely." His voice cracked. "We built Holt Industries together from nothing, but 3 weeks ago I found irregularities in our overseas accounts." The memories came faster now, sharper. Shell companies, money laundering, connections to something called the Meridian Syndicate. He looked up at Ramirez. "Chen was using my company to move illegal funds." "The Meridian Syndicate is a sophisticated criminal organization we've been tracking for years," Ramirez explained. "Your testimony could help us break their entire operation." More images flashed through Damien's mind. Late nights reviewing documents, secret meetings with federal agents, growing paranoia as he realized the depth of the corruption. "I gathered evidence," he continued. "USB drives, paper trails, recordings of conversations. I was supposed to turn everything over to your team the day after." He trailed off, remembering screeching tires and shattering glass. Hours passed as agents cycled through, asking detailed questions about accounts, dates, and names. Between sessions, Damien caught glimpses of Jenna caring for Alice, reading her stories, braiding her hair, maintaining some semblance of normalcy despite their circumstances. Each time their eyes met, he felt a stab of guilt. During a break, Jenna brought him water and sat beside him. Without speaking, she placed her hand over his trembling ones. The simple gesture steadied him more than any words could have. "I remember the crash now," he said quietly. "Chen arranged it. Had someone tamper with my car's brakes and run me off the road. I managed to jump clear somehow, but the impact... He touched the fading bruises on his face. Everything went dark after that. Next thing I knew, I was stumbling through the cold, and you found me. Jenna listened without judgment, her thumb tracing gentle circles on his hand. You were meant to find us, she said simply. I believe that. As night fell, the questioning finally ended. Agents took up positions throughout the compound, while those inside settled into an uneasy quiet. Alice had fallen asleep again in one of the bedrooms, surrounded by stuffed animals brought by thoughtful agents. Damien found Jenna in the guest room next to Alice's, sitting on the edge of the bed and staring at nothing. He knocked softly on the open door. I'm so sorry, he said, voice heavy with regret. You and Alice should never have been dragged into this. I've put you both in danger just by being near you. Jenna looked up, her eyes tired but determined. Don't apologize for needing help. That night on the road, you were hurt, confused, afraid. What kind of person would I be if I'd just driven past? A safer one, he replied bitterly. A harder one, she corrected. Someone who'd forgotten that we're all connected, all responsible for each other. She stood and walked to him. Compassion is never a mistake, Damien, even when it costs us something. The sound of his real name on her lips made him ache. You gave me more than compassion, he said softly. You gave me a glimpse of what life could be. Simple, honest, full of love. Everything I'd forgotten was possible. Jenna touched his cheek gently. That life is still possible. Different now, maybe, but possible. They said goodnight shortly after, retreating to separate rooms as protocol required. But sleep proved elusive for both. Damien lay awake, remembering Alice's laughter as they built her bookshelf, Jenna's smile in the candlelight of her birthday celebration, the way their small family had fit together so naturally. In her room, Jenna stared at the ceiling, thinking of quiet mornings watching him help Alice with homework, of shared glances across the dinner table, of everything left unsaid between them. Between them, Alice slept peacefully, clutching the stuffed bear an agent had given her. In her dreams, she was back on their porch swing, sandwiched between her mother and the man who had begun to feel like a father, watching the stars come out one by one. Dawn crept through the safe-house windows, painting the kitchen walls in soft golden light. The morning felt surreal, too peaceful for the gravity of what lay ahead. Federal agents moved quietly through the house, checking security monitors and speaking in hushed tones. Agent Ramirez called Damien into the main living area, where several agents had gathered around a large table covered with documents. Maps, photographs, and security plans spread across the surface like pieces of a complex puzzle. Mr. Holt? Ramirez began, his voice firm but compassionate. We need to discuss the next steps. Your testimony is crucial to bringing down the Meridian Syndicate. After the deposition, you'll need to enter witness protection immediately. Damien stood straighter, his jaw set. And Jenna and Alice? For their safety, they should return home once we've secured the area. We'll maintain surveillance, but no. Damien's voice was quiet but absolute. They stay with me. Sir, with all due respect, witness protection is complex enough for one person. Adding civilians, especially a child, they're already involved. Damien interrupted. The syndicate knows where they live. They've seen their faces. I won't abandon them to face that threat alone. From the kitchen doorway, unseen, Jenna pressed a hand to her mouth. She'd come to ask about breakfast arrangements, but found herself frozen, heart pounding at Damien's words. Mr. Holt? Another agent tried. We understand your concern, but do you? Damien's voice grew intense. These people took me in when I had nothing, not even my name. They showed me kindness when I was lost. They became—" He paused, emotion thick in his throat. "They became my family. I won't leave them unprotected. Either we stay together, or I don't testify at all." Jenna's eyes filled with tears at his declaration. She'd known their connection was deep, but hearing him claim them as family, hearing the fierce protection in his voice, it shook her to her core. The agents exchanged looks. Ramirez sighed heavily. "We'll need to clear it through proper channels, but given the circumstances, we can arrange temporary joint protective custody, at least until the immediate threat is neutralized." "Thank you," Damien said simply. As the agents dispersed to make arrangements, Jenna quietly slipped into the kitchen. She needed a moment to collect herself, to process everything she'd heard. She began pulling out items for breakfast: eggs, bread, fruit, her hands moving automatically while her mind whirled. Minutes later, Damien found her there. He paused in the doorway, taking in her familiar movements, the way morning light caught her dark curls. "Need help?" She turned, offering a soft smile. "You could start the coffee." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, moving around each other with the ease of people who'd shared a kitchen before. When everything was ready, they settled at the kitchen island, steaming mugs before them. "I heard what you said," Jenna admitted quietly. "About not leaving us." Damien met her eyes steadily. "I meant every word. It's dangerous what you're doing, testifying against these people." "Yes." He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. "But sometimes doing the right thing is dangerous. I learned that from you, actually." "From me?" "The night you found me. You could have driven past. It would have been safer. But you chose compassion over fear." He reached across the island, touching her hand. "You taught me that faith and courage aren't about not being afraid. They're about doing what's right, despite the fear." Jenna turned her hand over, lacing her fingers with his. "I've been praying a lot," she confessed. "For guidance, for protection, for understanding of why God put us in each other's paths." "And what answer did you get?" She smiled slightly. "That sometimes love is the answer, even when we don't know the question." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching sunlight stretch across the floor. From upstairs came the sound of Alice stirring, followed by the gentle murmur of an agent helping her get ready for the day. "I need you to know something," Damien said finally, "before everything changes again." He squeezed her hand gently. "These past days with you and Alice, they've shown me who I want to be, not just who I was. Whatever happens next, I promise I'll protect you both, not just from physical danger, but from losing the peace we found together." Tears pricked at Jenna's eyes again. "I trust you," she whispered. "God help me, I barely know you, but I trust you completely." Alice's footsteps on the stairs broke the moment. She appeared in the doorway, hair slightly rumpled, clutching her stuffed bear. An agent followed discreetly behind. "Mommy, Mr. Damien, can we have pancakes?" Jenna laughed softly, wiping her eyes. "Come here, baby. Let's make breakfast together." They spent the rest of the morning in a strange bubble of normalcy, making pancakes, telling stories, pretending the house wasn't surrounded by armed agents. But reality couldn't be held at bay forever. By early afternoon, Ramirez returned with final instructions. "We move at dawn tomorrow," he explained, spreading out a map of the route to the federal courthouse. 3 decoy convoys, full tactical escort. Ms. Clark, you and Alice will ride with Mr. Holt in the primary vehicle. Everything's been arranged." Damien nodded, his face serious. "Thank you, Agent Ramirez, for everything." As the day waned, the safe house hummed with preparation. Agents checked and rechecked equipment. Backup plans were reviewed. Emergency protocols were established. Through it all, Damien stayed close to Jenna and Alice, as if drawing strength from their presence. That evening, they sat together in the living room, Alice colouring while Jenna and Damien talked quietly about the next day's journey. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Armed agents patrolled the perimeter, their shadows long in the fading light. Dawn broke over the mountains with streaks of pink and gold, but none of them had time to appreciate the beauty. Agents moved with practiced efficiency, checking equipment and reviewing protocols one final time. Jenna helped Alice into her warmest coat, while Damien double-checked the girl's backpack was packed with books and quiet activities. "Everyone ready?" Agent Ramirez asked, his voice gentle but firm. "Primary vehicle is waiting." The black SUV gleamed in the early morning light, its windows heavily tinted. 2 identical vehicles flanked it, the decoys that would split off during their journey. Damien helped Alice climb into the middle row of seats, then extended his hand to Jenna. She settled beside her daughter, drawing comfort from Alice's warm presence against her side. Damien slid in next to them, and immediately 4 agents took positions, 2 in front, 2 behind. The convoy rolled forward with military precision, each vehicle maintaining exact distances as they wound down the mountain roads. Alice pressed her face against the window, watching the scenery blur past. "Look, Mommy, dear," she whispered excitedly when they passed a small herd grazing in a meadow. "Beautiful, baby," Jenna murmured, grateful for her daughter's ability to find joy even in tense moments. She felt Damien's hand slip into hers, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. The 90-minute drive passed in relative silence, broken only by occasional radio chatter between vehicles and Alice's quiet comments about things she spotted outside. At predetermined points, the decoy vehicles peeled away, each taking different routes to confuse any possible pursuit. Finally, they approached the federal courthouse, a massive stone building rising against the morning sky. Their SUV pulled into a secured underground entrance where more armed agents waited. The vehicle came to a stop in a fortified bay, and Agent Ramirez turned to face them. "Mr. Holt, you'll be escorted directly to the preparation room. Ms. Clark, Officer Chen will take you and Alice to the protected witness area." His eyes softened slightly. "You'll be safe there." Damien squeezed Jenna's hand one last time before releasing it. "I'll see you soon," he promised, his voice steady despite the gravity of what lay ahead. Jenna and Alice followed Officer Chen, a kind-faced woman, through a series of secure corridors. The witness room was surprisingly comfortable, soft couches, a small table with chairs, even a mini-fridge stocked with drinks and snacks. Large windows let in natural light, though Jenna noticed they were specially reinforced. "Make yourselves at home," Officer Chen said warmly. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." Alice immediately pulled out her favorite books and settled on the couch. Jenna sat beside her, drawing her Bible from her purse. She'd marked several verses that morning, needing their comfort and wisdom. "Want to read together, baby?" she asked, opening to Psalm 27. Alice nodded, snuggling closer as Jenna began to read softly. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" They passed the morning this way, reading, playing quiet games with cards Alice had packed, and saying small prayers whenever worry crept in. Around noon, Officer Chen brought them lunch, sandwiches, fruit, and cookies that made Alice smile. Meanwhile, in the courtroom, Damien faced his past. He testified for hours, his voice clear and unwavering as he detailed years of discovering corruption within his own company. He spoke of finding evidence that his board member, Victor Matthews, had been using company resources to support a criminal syndicate. He described threats against employees' families, particularly targeting widows of veterans who had tried to expose the truth. "The night of the crash," Damien testified, "I had finally gathered enough evidence to take to federal authorities, but someone warned Matthews. My car was forced off the road at mile marker 47. The last thing I remember was the sound of gunshots and tires screeching. His next words carried deep emotion. I lost my memory in that crash, but I found something more valuable. A family who showed me what real courage looks like, what it means to help others even when it's risky. Their compassion helped me remember not just who I was, but who I want to be. The testimony stretched into the afternoon. Damien presented document after document, recording after recording. He answered questions with unwavering honesty, even when they forced him to admit his own past mistakes and blind spots that had allowed the corruption to grow. Finally, as the sun began its descent, Damien emerged from the courtroom. He looked exhausted but resolute, his tie loosened slightly, his shoulders carrying the weight of everything he'd revealed. The moment he stepped into the witness room, Jenna rushed to him. He wrapped his arms around her tightly, burying his face in her hair for a moment. Alice joined their embrace, her small arms circling both their waists. "You did it," Jenna whispered. "You're so brave." "We did it," he corrected gently. "I couldn't have found this courage without you both." Agent Ramirez appeared in the doorway. "Time to move to the secure location for tonight. The jury begins deliberation in the morning." Their new safe house was a comfortable cabin on the outskirts of town, heavily guarded but peaceful. After a simple dinner delivered by agents, they settled in the living room. Alice fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from the day's tension. Jenna and Damien sat together by the window, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. His hand found hers again, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Thank you," he said softly, "for waiting today, for being there." "Always," she replied simply, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to Alice's steady breathing and the quiet movements of agents outside. Tomorrow would bring the verdict, but for now, they had this moment of peace, a family forged in crisis, strengthened by faith, and bound together by love. Dawn crept over the mountains, painting the sky in gentle strokes of pink and gold. Inside the safe house, Damien sat on the worn leather couch, his fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. The television hummed softly in front of him, its blue light flickering across his tired face. Jenna joined him, settling close enough that their shoulders touched, offering quiet comfort as they waited for news. "Breaking news from the Colorado District Court," the anchor announced, her voice crisp and professional. In a stunning development following yesterday's testimony from CEO Damien Holt, federal agents have conducted pre-dawn raids across 3 states. The screen filled with dramatic footage of tactical teams surrounding buildings, their movements precise and coordinated. Damien's hand tightened around his coffee cup as familiar faces appeared in handcuffs. Victor Matthews, former board member of Holt Industries, was arrested at his lakeside mansion. The reporter continued. Sources say Matthews was the key figure in a criminal syndicate that had infiltrated multiple corporations. Additional arrests include... The list went on, each name representing another piece of the dangerous puzzle that had nearly cost Damien his life. He watched in silence as his former friend and betrayer, Victor Matthews, was led down the courthouse steps. The man's expensive suit couldn't hide his defeat, his head bowed as officers guided him into a waiting vehicle. Alice, who had been coloring quietly at the kitchen table, wandered over and climbed onto the couch between them. "Are the bad guys going away now?" she asked, her small voice full of hope. Damien set down his coffee and pulled her close. "Yes, sweetheart. They can't hurt anyone anymore." Agent Ramirez entered the room, his usually stern face softened by satisfaction. "Mr. Holt, the operation was a complete success. Every major player we identified is in custody. The syndicate's financial networks are frozen." He paused, allowing himself a small smile. "You're free to go. The protective custody order has been lifted." Jenna released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. After days of tension, the simple word free felt almost foreign. "Thank you." Damien stood, extending his hand to Ramirez. "For everything. For protecting us." "No, thank you." Ramirez replied, grasping his hand firmly. "Your testimony made this possible. A lot of families will sleep better tonight because of what you did." The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork and goodbye handshakes. The agents who had guarded them round the clock now smiled warmly, wished them well, and slowly departed. Finally, only one vehicle remained, a simple black sedan to take them back to town. The drive was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts as familiar landmarks appeared. The mountains seemed different somehow, still majestic, but less threatening now that the shadow of danger had lifted. When they pulled into the diner's parking lot, Jenna's old blue car sat exactly where she'd left it days ago, though it felt like a lifetime had passed. They stepped out into the cool mountain air. The diner's neon sign wasn't lit yet, but early morning regulars were already filing in for coffee and breakfast. The normalcy of it all, the clink of dishes, the smell of bacon, the quiet murmur of conversation, felt surreal after everything they'd been through. Damien stood beside Jenna's car, his hand resting on its hood as he looked around the small town that had become his sanctuary. The place where he'd found himself again, or perhaps discovered who he truly wanted to be. "I remember everything now," he said softly. "But I keep thinking about that first night when you found me on the road. You could have driven past. Most people would have." Jenna moved closer, her warm brown eyes meeting his. "I couldn't leave someone who needed help. That's not who I am." "That's exactly who you are." He smiled. "You and Alice, you showed me what real family feels like, what it means to care about something bigger than profit margins and corporate power." Alice tugged at his sleeve. "Does this mean you're not staying with us anymore?" The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility and uncertainty. Damien knelt down to her level, his voice gentle. "I need to take care of some things at my company, make sure all the bad stuff gets fixed, but this town, this place..." He glanced up at Jenna. "These people mean everything to me now." "We should take things slow," Jenna said, though her heart raced at the way he looked at her. "Get to know each other properly, now that we're not running for our lives." Damien stood, reaching for her hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally, familiar after the days of seeking comfort in each other's touch. "Slow sounds perfect," he agreed. "I have a lot to learn about being the kind of man who deserves a family like yours." The morning sun climbed higher, warming their faces as they stood together in the parking lot. Around them, the town was waking up. Shops opening their doors, people hurrying to work, life continuing its steady rhythm. But for them, everything had changed. The bond they'd formed under pressure had been tested, strengthened, and proven real. "Would you like to have breakfast?" Jenna asked, nodding toward the diner. "I know the owner. I bet we can get a good table." Damien laughed, the sound free and genuine. "I'd love that," he said, squeezing her hand. "And maybe after, I can take a look at that squeaky front door that's been bothering you." "Some things never change," she teased, remembering how he'd spent his days fixing everything he could reach. Alice grabbed both their hands, swinging between them as they walked toward the diner. The morning air was crisp with possibility, and the mountains stood silent, witness to this new beginning, not an ending, but a fresh start, built on trust, compassion, and the kind of love that grows stronger through adversity. The diner's bell chimed as they entered, stepping into the warm, familiar space where their story had really begun. They found a booth by the window, settling into this moment of peace, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Jenna's damaged front yard as a fleet of construction vehicles pulled up to her small rental house. Damien stood beside her on the sidewalk, his phone in hand as he coordinated with the project manager. "They'll have everything fixed within 48 hours," he assured her, watching her eyes widen at the sight of so many workers unloading equipment. "The best team in Colorado." Jenna shook her head, still struggling to process the whirlwind of the past few days. "Damien, I can't let you—" "Please," he said softly, touching her arm. "Let me do this. That bullet could have hit more than just the mailbox. And besides," he smiled, "I've grown rather fond of this porch." The construction crew worked with impressive efficiency, removing damaged sections and beginning repairs immediately. Alice watched from her bedroom window, fascinated by the activity below. She waved excitedly every time a worker looked up, earning friendly waves in return. Throughout that first day, Damien spent hours on his phone, speaking with executives and board members. Jenna overheard fragments about relocating offices and restructuring departments. During a break between calls, he explained his vision. "Holt Industries' philanthropic division needs a fresh start," he said, his eyes bright with purpose. "Away from the corruption in New York. This town, these mountains, there's something real here, something honest." By the second morning, Jenna returned to her regular shift at the diner, trying to maintain some normalcy. The moment she pushed through the door, however, she knew nothing would be quite normal again. "There she is," called Mr. Peterson, a regular who always ordered the same breakfast at 6:15 sharp. He held up the local newspaper, where a small article detailed Damien Holt's testimony and the corruption case. "Our very own hometown hero." Jenna felt her cheeks warm as other patrons turned to smile and wave. Sarah, her co-worker, rushed over with a tight hug. "Why didn't you tell me you were harboring a billionaire?" she whispered, grinning. "And such a handsome one." "I didn't know myself." Jenna laughed, tying on her apron. The weight of it felt familiar and grounding amid all the changes. He was just someone who needed help. Throughout her shift, customers kept congratulating her, not just on the news story, but on her kindness. "That's what this town needs more of," said Mrs. Henderson, patting Jenna's hand. "People helping people, no questions asked." Meanwhile, Damien had returned to the Veterans Center, this time not as a volunteer, but as himself. The director, Tom Wilson, listened with growing amazement as Damien outlined his plans. "We're talking about full funding for mental health programs," Damien explained, spreading documents across Tom's desk. "Job training initiatives, housing assistance, family support services, everything we should have been doing years ago." Tom, a Vietnam veteran who had run the center on a shoestring budget for decades, had to remove his glasses to wipe his eyes. "This will change lives," he said gruffly. "Real lives, real families." "That's the idea," Damien replied, thinking of how the center had helped him during his memory loss, how the veterans had accepted him without judgment. When Jenna finished her shift that afternoon, she found a text message from Damien asking her and Alice to meet him at the community center. As they drove over, Alice bounced excitedly in her seat. "Is it a surprise?" she asked for the 10th time. "Is it a good surprise?" "We'll find out soon, baby," Jenna said, though her own heart was racing with anticipation. The community center's parking lot was fuller than usual. As they walked inside, they found the main hall transformed. Simple but elegant decorations adorned the walls, and chairs had been arranged in neat rows. A podium stood at the front, and beside it, a large covered sign. Damien greeted them warmly, leading them to seats in the front row. Other familiar faces filled the room. Veterans from the center, regulars from the diner, neighbors who had helped during their crisis. "I wanted to do something meaningful," Damien said, standing before the small gathered crowd. "Something that would honor the spirit of this community, and particularly one person whose legacy of kindness lives on." He glanced at Jenna, his eyes soft with emotion. "Margaret Clark never met me, but her daughter inherited her compassion, her strength, and her unwavering faith in helping others. When I was lost, literally and figuratively, that compassion saved my life." Jenna felt tears welling up at the mention of her mother's name. Alice squeezed her hand tight. "Today I'm announcing the establishment of the Margaret Clark Foundation," Damien continued, as the cover was pulled from the sign. "A $10 million endowment dedicated to supporting single parents, veterans, and families facing hardship in our community." The room erupted in applause. Jenna sat frozen, staring at her mother's name in elegant letters, barely registering the details Damien was sharing about programs, scholarships, and support services. "Your mother believed in helping people stand on their own feet," he said later, as people mingled and celebrated. "This foundation will do exactly that, give people the tools and support they need to build better lives." Jenna finally found her voice. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, looking around at the joy and hope filling the room. Veterans were already speaking with program coordinators, single mothers were collecting information about assistance programs, and children played together in a corner while their parents discussed opportunities they'd never dreamed possible. "You don't need to say anything," Damien replied, watching Alice show another little girl the foundation's brochure. "You and your mother taught me that true wealth isn't about money. It's about what you do with it. This is just the beginning." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the newly painted siding of Jenna's restored house. Fresh flowers bobbed in the breeze from pristine flower beds that lined the walkway, their sweet fragrance filling the air. The house looked better than new, transformed from a weathered rental into a true home. Jenna heard Alice's excited voice before she saw her daughter running up the path, Damien following close behind with a gentle smile on his face. Mummy, you have to see what they did with my room." Alice grabbed Jenna's hand, practically dragging her inside. "They made the shelves exactly like the ones Damien built before, but even better." The construction team had indeed replicated Damien's handmade bookshelf design perfectly, creating built-in shelving that wrapped around Alice's room. Every detail matched his original work, down to the gentle curves of the wood. As evening approached, they gathered on the rebuilt porch. The new swing swayed gently, its chains no longer creaking. Golden sunlight painted the sky in shades of pink and orange. Suddenly, Damien knelt before them both, his eyes full of emotion. "Losing my memory was terrifying," he said softly, "but it helped me find what truly matters. Before I had wealth and power, but I was empty inside. You two showed me what real love looks like." He took Jenna's hand, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't want to build a future based on what I own or what I can give you. I want to build one based on love, the kind of love that takes in strangers and heals broken things. Will you both share that future with me?" Tears spilled down Jenna's cheeks as she whispered, "Yes." Alice launched herself at them both, her arms wrapping around their necks as she squealed with joy. Together they walked into their bright, warm home, through the door that had first opened to a stranger and now welcomed a family, one built on compassion, faith, and the beautiful gift of second chances. "Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe. And tomorrow, I'll bring you another story crafted with heart."